to go. Okay, welcome everyone to our evening session. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a disclosure. Does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move to the public meeting. Sorry, I just put my notes away. So that we have a statutory public meeting this evening with the City of Waterloo official plan review. And so I just will read the formal procedure for statutory public meeting. This is a public meeting to consider item 11A, City of Waterloo official plan review, phase 1, OPA number 58. Today's public meeting is convened under section 17(15) of the Planning Act. The notice for this public meeting was advertised in the Record on August 22nd, 2024, and sent to individuals on the official plan review email list. Delegations will be heard today, but no decisions will be made. Anyone in attendance today will be given an opportunity to speak. If you wish to be notified of further meetings on the city official plan review, please add your name, your contact information to the sign-in sheets provided at the entrance of the chamber. Written comments may also be submitted to the city clerk. So to start, though, we'll invite Rick Martin, city staff, to provide a brief overview of the draft official plan review.
Good evening, Mayor McCabe, members of council, community. So the purpose of today's public meeting is to share information and hear considerations from the community on the official plan review, to receive comments on the official plan review as part of the decision-making process. So since we released the plan back in June, you may remember, we have circulated the OP widely and consulted with agencies and different interested parties throughout the community. We visited committees of council, and we continue to actively work with them on the draft plan and policies. We visited various libraries throughout the community to spread the word on the OP review and get some feedback, including going to the night market. So we tried to reach people at all different locations. We hosted a community workshop a couple in the summer with the development community to receive feedback. And earlier this month, we had a public open house on the OP, providing general information to the public and interested parties. We're receiving all this information today, and we'll continue to do so for the next couple weeks, all to incorporate that input and consider it as part of the OP review before we bring back a recommended final draft to council to consider later on this fall. So an overview of our official plan review. A reminder that ROP is intended to ROP review, is intended to update the policies that we have in place. We're looking at the next 25, 30 years as part of this OP review. There'll be subsequent reviews until then, but 2051 is the planning date that we're working towards in the update review. So there's lots of changes part of this, this project, but if we narrow it down to 3 common areas, we're looking to streamline policies, making sure that the plan is efficient and easy to read and easy to use. We're looking to facilitate more housing in the community that's required. That's through various policy mechanisms facilitated through the OP. And overall, we're looking to enhance and ensure that we have complete communities. So making sure that we have places to live, places to work, places to go to school, and places to have recreation, all those components that are required as part of the OP and as part of overall community. So breaking down the key components of the OP review, we've done different phases. So phase 1, we're not taking the entire OP review forward right now, but largely the majority of it. So the main part is Chapter 3, Chapter 10, and Chapter 12. So Chapter 3, as a reminder for everyone, is our built city forum, city forum part of the OP. This identifies the key components, the building blocks of the city, as if you will, the nodes and corridors, the neighborhood areas, major transit station areas, for example. It's really the building blocks in this chapter that describes how the policies are implemented. So we're moving things around, we're updating targets and requirements here, both to respond to changes through that's occurred at the provincial level, but also to address the needs of the community, is identified in Chapter 3. So that's probably where you'll see the most changes in the draft policies. We're also updating Chapter 10. This is our land use chapter. This is where we're updating policies specifically relating to residential areas, commercial areas, employment areas, academic areas, and we have a new designation in this plan called stationary mixed use. That's for areas that were formerly employment use, and now we're looking to encourage and allow a more diverse mix of uses in the area. So you'll see some chapters, just a few tweaks to policies, and other areas we've added new components to the chapter going forward. And finally, there's a variety of smaller changes sprinkled throughout the plan. There's some housekeeping amendments, there's some clarification and streamlining policies and updates that are incorporated into the plan. Our Chapter 12, or implementation chapter, has been updated somewhat, again, to make sure that we're consistent with provincial changes. And then there's some light updates to some of the early chapters as part of the OP review. So as I mentioned, we're taking this forward in phases. So what you won't see as part of this phase are updates to our environment policies, transportation, culture, heritage, a few others. So we will address those down the road, but right now we're focusing on Chapter 3, Chapter 10, Chapter 12, and a few updates throughout the plan accordingly. As far as timeline goes, we're in the home stretch for this phase right now. After this public meeting, we'll continue to receive comments, as I mentioned earlier. We'll consider those and incorporate those into the final recommended plan that we'll bring back to Council's consideration later on this fall. And then that will go to the region for approval. That is the process we have in place right now. After following that, we will initiate Phase 1B. This is where we'll take care of some of the remaining larger chapters, or remaining chapters, sorry, in the OP, including transportation, utilities, cultural heritage, and then updates as necessary. The advantage of taking forward the OP review in phases is that we're able to address items if there's additional changes from the provincial level, for example, we can address some of those in later phases down the road. And then you'll notice a big component that's not going forward as of yet is Chapter 8, Environment and Energy Policies. This requires a bit more analysis and a bit more in-depth review, so we want to make sure that we look at this properly, so that'll be in later phases, but it will get addressed as part of the completion of the OP review. So as I mentioned, we have our public meeting today. We're receiving comments, and then we'll have some updated draft later on this fall. So just for reference, we're updating our schedules, our land use maps as part of the OP review as well. So here in the larger map, you can see the draft proposed map. It's not too dissimilar to what our current framework is right now. The smaller map is our existing policy land use schedule. You'll notice probably that one of the biggest changes as far as land use from Schedule A is the purple hatched area. That's our institutional uses. So we're taking those, proposing to take those areas out of employment designation and have their own designation. So it's a large land mass. That's why it probably stands out a bit. But a few changes to some of our commercial policies, and the dark blue is the new stationary mixed use area. Another schedule that you'll likely see a bit more change on is the city structure map. We've combined some of our other schedules into this map to create an overall city structure. So now we have nodes and corridors all in one map. Our uptown area is our primary node, and our major transit station areas overlapping those areas as well. The areas in the white being are predominantly neighborhood areas. And so we've combined them all into one overall city structure for streamlining purposes. And then another map that you'll see a few changes on is our built form map. We are recommending moving away from strict height and density regulation to more just focusing on height. So this is shown on this map here. We have some small updates to our height policies and major transit station areas in particular, but that is one of the areas that we're actively reviewing and considering how we would recommend heights across the city. So right now there's just a small change, well, relatively speaking, in MTSA specifically, but heights are one of the considerations that are ongoing in conversation throughout the community. So there's a few other changes to some other schedules as well, but these are likely the maps that are of most interest. So the other ones are more updates and small tweaks going forward. So with that, today is really just an opportunity for us to listen. We invite everyone to come forward, ask any questions, and we'll take note of everything and update the plan accordingly and bring back a recommended plan to council consideration in early December is the target date. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. So council, do you have any questions for staff? Go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. Just for clarity, when the comments that council made back when this was introduced in June, I recall, those have not been incorporated at this stage. We don't need to repeat those at this point in time. Those have been captured and are going to be reviewed as part of this process that you've just outlined.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, yes, we received comments starting in June. We received comments throughout the summer, various parties, so all of those are being compiled and continue to compile. So yes, we've noted all those and we'll bring back forth, when we come back, we'll compile all the comments we received from June onwards and I have a table showing how we've addressed them. So yeah, there's no need to repeat them, we have them.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, seeing no questions, thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate the work on this. I will now ask any registered delegations to come forward. And the first on the list is Addison Milne Price, a planner with Design Plan Services, Inc. Good evening. Good evening, Addison. Welcome, and I understand you have no presentation, so you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name, as the Mayor said, is Addison Milne Price. I'm a planner at Design Plan Services. I'm here on behalf of a property owner of 321 Weber Street to discuss the proposed designation of this land. The property I'm here to discuss is located in the southeast portion of the Columbia District within the city. More specifically, it's located on the west side of Weber Street. It's just south of Columbia Street East and north of University Avenue. It's currently occupied by a single-story commercial building that's home to a Wild Wings, a Games on Tap, a board game cafe, and a recreational facility, a Bad Axe throwing company. In terms of the area nearby, the north of the property is predominantly single-story commercial uses. There's a used car dealership to the immediate north, and lands west of the subject property are largely made up of mid-rise residential uses, including student housing to accommodate the nearby post-secondary schools. To the south of the subject property, there is a variety of commercial uses consisting of 1 to 2 story buildings, and to the east there are employment lands, which include an industrial warehouse for furniture, the Waterloo Regional Police Services, as well as several industrial warehouses for automotive parks. My comments on the draft OPA, as per the subject property's designation, is that the current and proposed designation remains as corridor commercial as per Schedule A1 on the draft official plan. The updated principles and vision of the draft official plan do place an emphasis on economic sustainability through the efficient use of land and providing opportunities for commercial and employment growth, as well as an increase in supply and diversity of housing. There's also an emphasis placed on social sustainability, which draws on creating spaces to meet the needs of a growing and diversifying population. I respectfully will submit that the proposed corridor commercial designation of this property and of the surrounding lands does not serve to effectively meet the principles, visions, and policies of the draft official plan as they are written. I'll note that the designation immediately north and west of the subject lands has changed in this new official plan from corridor commercial to mixed use community. And I believe the change in designation to mixed use community should essentially continue south along the west side of Weber Street to include the subject lands. I feel that mixed-use community would be the most appropriate designation for the subject lands to meet the principles, visions, and policies as set out in the draft official plan by accommodating a variety of uses, including commercial, retail, service, as well as residential spaces. This suggested change would also emphasize the need for intensification within the built-up area, which efficiently uses land and community infrastructure while also limiting outward expansion. Furthermore, the planned function of corridor commercial as per the proposed section 10.2.2.6 is to accommodate commercial uses that require vehicular accessibility, large format buildings, and necessarily cater to the traveling public. Meanwhile, the planned function of mixed-use communities as per the proposed official plan is to accommodate a range of uses, including commercial, retail, services, and residential, and are designed to create complete communities with a strong commercial focus. Given the context of the surrounding area that I expressed earlier and the lands immediately adjacent to the west being designated high-rise residential, a mixed-use community designation is well suited to serve the immediate and surrounding area of these subject lands. Now, furthermore, the region of Waterloo recently adopted a Regional Official Plan Amendment 6, which contains a strong focus on intensification and 15-minute neighborhoods. For these neighborhoods to function, they need to be designed with a diverse mix of land uses and provide a full range of housing to accommodate a range of incomes and household sizes. They also require development densities with enough people living and working in the area to support a broad range of services. And as per Chapter 2 of the Regional Official Plan Amendment, 15-minute neighborhoods provide a foundation to achieve reduced greenhouse gas emissions and reduce air pollution by minimizing the need for automobile travel. Additionally, in 2022, the government of the province introduced More Homes Built Faster Act to address the lack of housing supply. With this, the province assigned the City of Waterloo a housing target of 16,000 new units from 2022 to 2031, and designating the subject lands as mixed-use community will help facilitate the creation of new housing to meet the city's housing target and perhaps even exceed it. Overall, I feel that the proposed designation of the subject lands to mixed-use community is further supported by City of Waterloo's Commercial and Employment Policy Study Review, which emphasizes that mixed-use development, including commercial components, is crucial to meet the growing demand as the city expands. This policy study review also suggests that existing commercial corridors can be revitalized with the addition of residents and support from surrounding employees. Overall, it's my respectful opinion that it would be appropriate for the City of the Waterloo to support the proposed land use designation of mixed-use community for the subject property and surrounding lands as shown on Schedule B of the provided correspondence. This proposed mixed-use community designation of the subject lands for future intensification will allow for a range and mix of housing types and to achieve a complete community and contribute to the housing target of 2031. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take some.
Thank you very much, Addison. Council, do you have any questions for this delegate? Okay, there's a question for staff about this presentation, so we'll just, there's no questions? Okay, thank you very much, Addison. Do you want to take staff questions of staff now or after all the delegations are complete?
Through the chair, it could be done in either way. We will have time at the end. I think after all the delegations, you would certainly want to have a portion of time to ask questions of staff, but you could certainly ask it now.
Go ahead, Councillor.
And actually, I will also ask if it's appropriate for me to ask a question at this stage prior to anything coming before council. So I just had a general question for staff about corridor commercial zoning.
I think Joel could speak to this a little bit more, but this is a public meeting. It's intended to provide that opportunity to hear from delegations, and if council has a question, I don't see anything prohibiting you from asking it. Certainly, this is not a decision-making,
No.
so opinions, firm decisions, but questions are completely appropriate in my mind.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my question is about the, Joel, the corridor commercial zoning. And I know in other areas we've looked at, for example, employment lands, that there needs to be a certain percentage of employment lands for a city. So I'm wondering if there's anything like that about corridor commercial, if it provides a specific use and need in the city in percentage terms.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Rowe. I'll hand it to Rick for a more fulsome answer, but certainly the city's commercial lands are broken up into essentially a hierarchy with a variety of planned functions that we're trying to achieve across the city. So part of the challenge that the official plan team is working through is how do we continue to accommodate that broad range of commercial services and functions within the community as we intensify and grow. And again, complete communities doesn't mean every property has to be mixed use or even intensified, but it does speak to citywide how we're intending to accommodate all of those ranges of uses within each of the land use categories, commercial being one of them. But I'll hand it to Rick, who can speak in more detail to the specifics of this official plan review.
Certainly. And yeah, so the commercial employment study took a look at our commercial framework throughout the city. And while we have moved some areas to incorporate more mixed use and more mixed use retail, there remains a need to have different types of uses, and especially when it comes to commercial. So we are, in the past, the corridor commercial has emphasized being auto-oriented. So we are looking to de-emphasize the auto-oriented nature of that designation, but there still remains a need to provide for larger format commercial uses. So majority of the commercial area is proposed to be commercial mixed use, but there is a need to have some different types of uses for more quasi-industrial, larger format commercial uses. So it is trying to find that balance, and there's complete community within neighborhoods, but then there are certain uses that need to be accommodated in certain areas. So, so certainly we wouldn't look to eliminate that designation completely, looking to update it and refine it, but there's certainly a need for all types of different types of commercial.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. I'm just curious if maybe you can expand on that a little bit more, Rick, because when I look at the land use schedule here, I see a host of mixed-use community designations, and I would say, this is just looking at it off the top of the head here, but looking at most of them, they are not actually being used as mixed use. They're simply commercial plazas, and so I'm curious what goes into it from your perspective or from staff's perspective when you're thinking about what you would like to see versus what is actually happening in practice. If we're designating a host of properties around the city as mixed-use commercial, but they're only commercial, and we're designating some properties as commercial, but they would like to be mixed use, how do we sort of square that? What are some of the thoughts that go into it?
To the Mayor, to the Councillor. Yeah, so the corridor commercial designation, it's probably the most limited commercial type that we have in the city. So we don't have large parcels of it. So what we do have, and the practice of staff has been to recommend retaining those for that purpose. So we've combined the mixed use designation. So we had a mixed use neighborhood, a mixed use community. So we've combined those into one. So it does look like we have a lot more of that type of use. And the difference between that is a matter of scale. So it's distinguished on different schedules, for example. But what we're trying to provide for is opportunity. So we can't necessarily control what is going in there, what we can with land use, but it's really providing the opportunity of what can go for those areas. So providing that there is space available in the city, so it can evolve over time to provide those larger format uses when it comes to the corridor commercial specifically.
Did you follow up? Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, through you, Mayor. And just, I appreciate that, thank you. Just for curiosity, when we're talking about an individual parcel of land, should that property owner want to initiate a zoning bylaw change or an OPA, notwithstanding whatever this official plan is going to look like, they're certainly within their rights to advance that should they want to make the case that an individual property makes sense for something other than what is proposed in the OP, in the zoning bylaw, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yeah, so both through this process, we'll evaluate everything. People can make recommendations and requests. So we are evaluating every request on its own merits. But beyond this process, absolutely, there's always opportunity to official plan amendments and rezoning as necessary. So there's multiple avenues to pursue that.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? Okay, seeing none, we will go to the next delegate, which is, looks like a combined presentation. Sam Gonzalez Horton, VP Activism, PSA, UW NDP Club, with Violetta Manisterliu and Manuela Deshonga. Apologies if I've mispronounced your names. Welcome to the chambers, and thanks for coming in tonight, and you have 5 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Sam Gonzalez Horton. I'm the VP Activism for the Waterloo NDP Club. And I'm joined this evening by Violetta Ministerio and Manuela de Cunha from the Planning Students Association. And today we are going to be recommending that staff considers the elimination of parking minimums citywide during the process of this official plan review.
Bill 185 received royal assent on June 6, 2024. In its many reforms to land use planning in Ontario, one major policy that was implemented was the elimination of parking minimums in all major transit station areas province-wide. Although this is a great start, a majority of land in Waterloo is still subjected to this onerous and outdated regulatory tool from a bygone age of city planning, intended to rapidly adjust to mass suburbanization and car ownership.
The first parking minimums were implemented in Los Angeles in 1931. This seemed reasonable at the time as planners, developers, and politicians struggled to alleviate the parking problem. However, the abundant parking provided by these minimums induced demand for car travel, further influencing the land use of the city. This wicked cycle has led to the creation and proliferation of so-called non-places, and this issue is certainly not exclusive to LA. This had and continues to have a massive influence on transportation patterns in the city as well as the built environment. This is exemplified by the extinct bungalow court, a missing middle housing option iconic to LA's built environment made illegal due to parking minimums.
This illustrates how parking minimums restrict creative urban design and homogenize the built environment. If the city wants to move towards good urban design, creativity, intensification, and placemaking, eliminating minimums is a great start. Parking minimums are preemptively destructive, degrade the potential of place before it can be realized, mandate by law the least financial productive use of land possible, and disperse land uses and tax revenue alarmingly thin, creating a dangerous positive feedback loop. Although the city has clearly stated multiple times in the OP that compact mixed-use development is a priority, policy on parking should better reflect these statements.
On top of being a burden on city finance, parking minimums are burdensome to personal finance as well. Not including the original cost or lease cost, car ownership in Canada costs on average almost $14,000 a month. $1,400 a month, sorry. Provision of parking also factors into the cost of rent, with this American estimate from 2015 clocking in at an additional $225 a month. The cost of building the parking itself, which does not even include the long-term maintenance cost, is $16,000 for a surface spot and $50,000 to $200,000 for a structured parking spot. These costs represent both a barrier to provide more units in the first place, as well as costs being passed on to tenants and residents who rent and house prices.
As I'm sure you are well aware, parking is a polarizing issue. The wording of eliminating parking minimums may sound like a radical proposition. However, it is not about eliminating parking overnight. It's about the freedom for developers in the market to be able to decide how much parking is appropriate for their respective development. This isn't an untested idea either. Since 2015, the Parking Reform Network estimates that 88 cities across North America have eliminated not just some, but all parking minimums citywide. The stories of these cities who've eliminated parking mandates, like Hartford, Connecticut, San Jose, California, and even Bandera, Texas, a town of just 671 people, are much the same. There haven't been any earth-shattering changes. This reform is not a flashy solution to our housing crisis, but is a fantastic incremental step that sets us up for long-term platform for building community wealth.
In the City of Waterloo Parking Standard Studies, it says that a major concern about eliminating parking minimums in the city is that 76% of Waterloo residents commute to work by private automobile. However, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the effects of eliminating parking minimums are. Parking won't disappear overnight. Eliminating minimums is simply changing the way we go about providing parking in the hopes that, in concert with other policies and incentives, can slowly make Waterloo a more sustainable, healthy, and equitable city to live 20 to 30 years down the line.
You have 1 minute.
The city of Waterloo is at a critical juncture. The region is expected to hit a population of 1 million by 2051, and we are currently in a global affordability and climate crisis. The state of Waterloo tomorrow relies on the policies that we enact today, and our transportation and land use policy will be a key determinant in how Waterloo responds to these crises. The built environment lasts for a long, long time, and we should collectively be thinking about the kind of city we want to be, rather than planning for the kind of city we are right now. Planning should be proactive, not reactive. However, the provision of parking may be the exception that proves the rule. Overbuilding parking and dealing with the systemic consequences is much more dire than underbuilding parking and making adjustments. For the sake of affordability, sustainability, and economic vitality of our city, we strongly suggest considering the elimination of parking minimums citywide during the process of the official plan review.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You've obviously practiced that. Just wait there for a moment, and we'll see if anyone has any questions. Council, are there questions for these delegates? Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Thank you, through Mayor McCabe. Excellent presentation. Appreciate that. I may have a question for staff as well too. One of the things that we often hear when we talk about eliminating parking minimums is the impact that overflow parking is going to have. So if a development does not build enough parking internally, those people will still park somewhere. And currently in the city of Waterloo, we have pretty onerous parking restrictions on our public streets. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are and give you an opportunity to sort of proactively respond to a comment should that sort of emerge with respect to how the public would handle overflow parking from underbuilt parking in developments.
Yeah, absolutely. So through the mayor to Councillor Bodley, the wording there was obviously underbuilt parking, but that's obviously not what we want. That's not what developers are obviously intending. But in the event that there is quote unquote overflow parking, there was a study done again in that transportation study, and peak parking utilization, at least in Uptown, was only 61% as of I believe a study in 2019. They did another study during COVID, but the numbers were much lower. wasn't quite accurate. So we have again been overbuilding parking in this city, in this continent for the last 40, 50 years. And so we do have the parking supply. I think it just comes down to finding creative ways to address that, whether that's shared parking with developments in lots that are underused, and other transportation demands solutions. And obviously we've seen record GRT ridership. We've seen the region through the OP and as well through the city's OP directly state that we want to move away from car dependency, and we want to move to more active transportation and such. So I think, again, down the line, just because we're eliminating parking minimums does not mean that we're not going to be building parking. Developers will respond to the demands and what they think is best. But yeah, that's essentially it.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor? Okay. Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm always interested in future, like what you see your future need for cars may be. Like, would you be interested in perhaps living in an apartment or a condo and not needing a car? Like, I'm always interested in students and sort of what that, when you're advocating for something like this, what your own intentions are.
Yeah,
if you want to share. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, absolutely. So through the mayor, Councillor Rowe, obviously I'm biased. I'm a planning student. I love walking, biking, active transportation, all that. I'm quite biased, but yeah, I don't ever see myself owning a car, ever. I don't think I can afford it. I don't think down the road, when it comes to our housing situation, when it comes to just what I see are the societal externalities of driving, and I think a lot of people, at least in our program, feel the same way. And the trends are going that way generally for young people as well. So I think more people are actively looking for car-free living, car-free solutions, and I think that's both supported, again, within our own OP, and then as well through regional plans with the expansion of Go Transit, et cetera, through the province and even through our federal government as well. So I think it's definitely something that the city should be keeping an eye on, but I don't know if you guys want to speak to this as well.
I totally agree. I don't feel the need to have a car right now. I just got my G1 yesterday, but I'm 19, so, or like last week. And it was against, like, I didn't feel the need to get it at all. So I'm from Toronto as well, where TTC is such a big thing. I don't feel the need personally to have a car.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm from, like, the middle of nowhere. Like, my hometown is, like, 3,000 people. And so I guess it's sort of weird, like, coming from such a low population area to even want to maybe even live without a car. But I know even, like, friends from my hometown, too, are very much questioning the need for car ownership, for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely not the most affordable option given the cost of insurance, the cost of owning the car, the cost of gas itself. It can often be prohibitive to own a car, and the only place I've really found where I require a driver's license is for certain jobs. I've never actually used it on the day-to-day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspectives, and I think that as we plan for the future, it's important for staff to hear that, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your delegation. You can sit down now.
Thank you.
We always appreciate when anyone comes into the chamber, but particularly people who are much younger than us sitting around the horseshoe. So thanks for sharing that. Right, sorry, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Bodley has a question for staff.
Sorry, thank you, through you, Mayor. Excuse me, through you, Mayor McCabe. Just technically, I know there's been some conversations about parking minimums around the horseshoe here, theoretically, over the course of the last couple of years and beyond. From a technical perspective, does the OP actually address parking minimums directly, or is there a particular, or is that a zoning bylaw amendment? And if council were to want to advance this, or something like this, what would be the mechanism by which council would direct staff to look into this?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bodley. Yes, on a technical level, the OP doesn't actually regulate the amount of parking. So what you'll find mostly in the official plan level is direction setting and urban and design considerations. So where parking is provided, it talks to encouraging underground, minimize parking, design elements, those kind of considerations. Actual numbers are not in the OP, and the direction for the OP review is to move away from specific technical criteria in the OP. So that's all regulated through the zoning bylaw. Through the OP, we can obviously the zoning bylaw follows the OP, so we can provide direction in the OP that will look to certain areas where we minimize parking or look to reduce it, and certainly that's already in large part in certain areas in the OP encourages that, but it would be providing the direction to implement through zoning for actual technical amounts.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, if I may, through you, Mayor McCabe, from an OP perspective, the areas with which the majority of the conversations around parking occur, are they in the transportation section that we are reviewing in Phase 1B, or?
They are largely in the transportation section. That we do talk about it because we're updating the urban design, so we address them through that and through reduction for intensification as well. So they are addressed on kind of a high level in those sections. More specifically, they are through transportation, but yeah, it's kind of the perspective that you're coming at for parking. Sorry.
One last one, sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor.
And through you, Mayor McCabe, broadly speaking, if council were to advance direction in this regard at some point, would it be your opinion that the OP is not, or that the OP is broadly supportive, that we are looking to minimize parking, as you had sort of said? Would there be anything that in the OP as it currently is constituted, or may look in the Phase 1B section, that would contravene or go against the idea that further reducing parking minimums or eliminating them entirely would be antithetical to anything in the OP.
Yeah, so the OP already dictates for stationaries in particular. There's already a reduction with provincial legislation. We're looking at refining those further. In intensification areas is already, and uptown, there's already provisions for looking to reduce in shared parking facilities. So a lot of that's already in there for those kind of areas. It's not as much broadly for other outside of other nodes and corridor areas, for example. So that's one area we could look to, if that's council's wish to look at.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you, Rick. Seeing no other questions on this, we will go to our next delegate, which is KLG. Welcome, Kay, for a new council cycle. Thanks very much, Kay. You have 5 minutes.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, I'm also going to talk about emissions from traffic, but I'm going to take kind of a different approach than you folks, because as most of you know here, I'm very concerned about greenhouse gas emissions, and traffic is the biggest contributor to Waterloo Region's greenhouse gas emissions. And since we're talking about a plan that will take us up to 2051, which is that just past that 2050 group when we want to have an 80% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, I'm looking at what kinds of measures are in this plan. Because at present, we're not on track to meet this. And so I'm looking for measures that will help us reduce our traffic emissions, and I'm not finding them. I'm not finding measures that will reduce the tendency, indeed the necessity for people in our suburbs. I'm not talking about the uptown area, which is served by transit, but the suburbs, where people have the tendency and indeed the necessity to jump in their car when they suddenly discover they've run out of milk or eggs. There are few, but very few, tiny red rectangles called convenience commercial on the commercial land use schedule. And true enough, the active transportation framework looks wonderful. There's a great network of trails and so on, but the winding nature of those trails suggests they're more recreational than providing one daily needs. So you think about how are we going to urbanize these existing suburbs, especially many of them were specifically designed to prevent efficient, purpose-driven traffic, including transit in them. And I think back to that day when I was doing, you'll appreciate the NDP people, an election literature drop in Vista Hills. Very hot day, I'd forgotten my water bottle, so I looked up on Google Maps. I saw it would be a 35-minute walk to the nearest convenience store. And I saw a lot of elderly people and teenagers and younger children in that neighborhood. And I thought, these people won't be able to hop in a car. So what are they going to do to, get their needs and so on? And furthermore, most of the additional dwelling unit applications that have appeared at the Committee of Adjustment, and I'm sure these aren't all of them, but I'm a member on that committee, and I've seen that many of them have been in our newer edge of the city neighborhoods, which are not at all served by transit. Again, it's a 35-minute walk to the bus stop in some of these places. So they have to be car reliant to get their groceries. And yet our neighborhoods haven't been designed for additional cars and traffic. And it's also, if we want to continue gentle intensification or more intensification of these neighborhoods, then we need to think about how we are going to get transit to them. And we need to think about ways we can do this. And I'm encouraged by this statement I found in the commercial uses of residential designations that lands designated low-rise, medium-high-rise, and high-rise residential may permit a limited range of commercial uses that cater to pedestrian, bicycle, and non-vehicular travel. So that's good, but I'd also like to see our vision imagining not just permitting this, but how we can actually get transit out to these neighborhoods. And that it's a tough challenge, I know, but what infrastructure planning do we need to do? So that's one of the things I'm concerned about. the other one, and I've been making extensive notes, which I will send to you, Rick, and so on, about many questions and things. But the other one I wanted to draw to your attention is a concern that I have about the uptown primary node. On one hand, the official plan says the goal is for a vibrant uptown, including protecting, conserving, and reusing existing built heritage and building upon the architectural integrity of buildings within uptown, the area. But the Main Street zoning category has a maximum of 5 stories, and a statement that minor increases in height beyond 5 stories may be considered by way of an amendment to the zoning bylaw. Now, my problem is that there's currently no buildings in uptown Waterloo that have 5 stories. So in a way, it feels like to me this is inviting or opening the door to the destruction of all the Main Street buildings except for those few which might be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. And so there's the streetscape. As you know, I'm a fan of heritage conservation and so on. But I think the other thing that concerns me is that if this 5-story, new ceiling raises the value of land, which could in turn trigger further increases in rent, as we saw a lot of them that accompanied the opening of the Ion. And I feel this could make it much more challenging to reach the stated goal of the official plan of wanting a variety of services and businesses in uptown. And the goal of retaining food stores in the uptown is mentioned frequently. But many of us remember how a very vibrant and much loved food store, Living Well Organically, closed after its rent was raised post-Ion. So those are the 2 things I wanted to draw your attention to tonight.
Thank you very much, Kay. I was just about to ask you to wrap up, but thank you very much. I appreciate that you continue to stay on top of this. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, come on back, Kay. Go ahead, Councillor Bassett.
Thanks through you, Mayor McCabe. One of the things I'm interested in is not so much, not that I'm not interested in transit, no worries, guys, but not so much about getting to the commercial from the suburbs, but more about bringing the commercial to the suburbs. And so even if we enabled that in the official plan in any location, for example, I think there would still be slow uptake, if any uptake at all. And I'd also be curious if people would still hop in their cars just to pop down to Sobeys or whatever. I do that also. Maybe not when Bridgeport gets a bike lane, but so I guess I'm curious for your thoughts on how we also change even if we were to enable it in the official plan, how do we change the culture to make people build it and then people want to go to it?
Well, this answer won't be popular with many people, but I would put road tolls on. I would really make it less comfortable for people to drive. Right now it's very, very comfortable for people to drive. I'm quite appalled by our premier threatening, promising to get rid of bike lanes because it's standing in the way of traffic. So that's what I would do if I ruled the world.
Very good. Well, I hope to see that day someday. Okay, thanks, Kay.
Thanks, Kay. And I just wanted to make a note, Kay, what you were mentioning about transit and the transit needs, particularly for, areas like Vista Hills and some other underserved areas, is that it's a very active discussion and live discussion with the at the regional council table and with regional staff, and there is an integrated mobility plan happening. Consultations that are happening right now. So anyone who's here and anyone who's listening, certainly you can go to Engage WR to find out more about that. But I, probably a couple of times a month or maybe a little bit more than that, I do get emails from people in Vista Hills asking about increased transit. And again, it is something that we are working at the region to see what we can do to improve the transit, in particular in the Vista Hills area where I hear about it most frequently. So thanks for that reminder. I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, thanks for mentioning that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor, you had a question for staff? Okay, Go ahead.
Thanks to you, Mayor McCabe. Just since Kay brought up the convenience commercial, and that's something I've been interested in, I'm curious if you are you able to speak at this point to any movement that might have been made to expand that throughout the city, or is that something we'd have to wait for?
Through the mayor to Councillor Vasek. Yes, so certainly we heard in June to look at consideration for expanded commercial uses in low-rise neighborhood areas. So we're actively reviewing that. So I don't have anything firm right now, but it's certainly something we are evaluating, and we'll have a recommendation to council in December.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright.
I just have a quick question for staff, if that's possible. So just reflecting on KLG's delegation here and thinking carefully about, whether we need to be extending transit, which really relies on another upper tier of government, versus extending amenities to neighborhoods. Like there's a trade-off there in terms of what we permit in different kinds of neighborhoods across the city. Just thinking about Ward 7 and the Uptown having gone through so many phases of development and infill that it now has everything everywhere within 15 minutes. And when I say 15 minutes, I mean walking, not even driving, including, Asian grocer and an Indian grocer, and, the world is basically at your fingertips. When you get into a suburb, you don't even have a corner store, as has been mentioned. And it might be a 15-minute drive, not a 15-minute walk, to get to some of the kinds of amenities that you might want in a neighborhood. So when we do talk about, in planning language, a 15-minute city, and not that there should be any restrictions associated with anybody's personal liberties when we talk about a 15-minute city. We're just talking about planning and urban design. Is that 15 minutes walking, or is that 15 minutes driving, is my question.
Through the mayor to the councillor. So a couple of points there. So the 15-minute communities generally is referred to walking to the extent possible, but it does come down to a matter of scale. So if you're in a dense node, you're likely to have a lot more options available to you. As you move to lower density or lower rise areas, it becomes more challenging, both from a transit perspective and from a services perspective. So it is relative to the surrounding community and the built environment. So trying to encourage different uses to the extent possible, but there are likely natural limits if the area stays at that density. So it does come down to kind of scale where possible. So, and that's the overall goal. It's not to say that every single area will likely evolve that way, because we are retrofitting and going forward. So.
And just to follow up, based on the experience along King Street, which was, I was just looking at a Google map and doing a little time span of it. So if I go back to photos from 2009, most of that major corridor going up King Street between Central and University is completely residential. There's maybe a tiny bit of any sort of commercial activity. Now there are restaurants on the main floors of many of the infill developments or cafes, which then suggests that there's another level of service, city service required in order to meet the new kind of infill that's there and the new types of activities. So for instance, we don't have adequate waste service along that stretch. So where are we thinking that the changes that we are proposing in the official plan, where there's going to be a lag then in terms of the municipal services that would be available as we intensify?
Certainly, and that's the reason I talked about the scale. So we wouldn't likely recommend a whole-scale change and mixed use to that level everywhere. For that reason, for transit, for infrastructure, for example. So in the lower rise areas, if we're recommending additional uses, it would be at a scale that's proportional to the area, because I mean, we might evolve there down the road, but we don't want to overwhelm those areas for that particular reason. So it does come down to a matter of scale over time, and not instituting those changes too quickly, and taking all those things in consideration. So it is a delicate balance, absolutely. So complete communities is locally, but also is making sure that the broader area is a complete community.
Which I guess I think then also brings me to the idea of how do we get to complete communities in suburbs that are monoculturally already populated?
It's certainly a challenge, and they're built-up areas, so it will not. We're seeing rapid change in some of our higher density intensification areas. Sometimes it looks like overnight things are changing. That scale and that pace, we're not likely to see in the more suburban communities. So it's about bringing in small-scale changes and small incremental changes in those areas. So we're not going to be rebuilding those from scratch. So we'll be incremental changes over time to those areas. So it certainly won't be overnight. It's a long-term goal. It's not something we can just flip a switch on.
One last question. So then when we're thinking about these sorts of changes to intensification and urbanization of our community as a whole, it's really concentric circles, like around those major corridors, those nodes. The suburbs really basically stay the suburbs for a long time.
Well, to the councillor, the rationale for having the hierarchy of the nodes and corridor is for that, because there's only so much capacity as far as services, and as far as commercial opportunities. So it is concentrated in those areas. We are trying to encourage more opportunities in different areas, but likely it's not going to again change overnight. So it will evolve over time, and some areas will go quicker than others. Some areas may not change at all. So it's providing that opportunity and trying to at least broaden the scope of what's available in the neighborhood over time, but it certainly will not see massive changes overnight. It just, will be focused in the built-up areas for the most part.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay. So if there's anyone else who wishes to speak, we have an opportunity now. Okay, we have a couple people. All the registered delegates have spoken, so Ashman, if you want to come forward. I think you know the drill, but please provide your name and your municipality of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ashwin Annamalai. I'm a resident of the city of Waterloo. I'm here to support the UW students and their activism. Thank you so much for showing up here. My good friend Sam is spearheading these initiatives, and it's so good to see young people being plugged into politics. So it's going to be hard for Council to not give in to their demands, and I would request Council to listen to these young people because they have so much wisdom and insight into what the future of the city should look like. We discuss a lot about parking, and if we got rid of parking minimums, the sky would not fall. Car ownership is going through a seismic shift. Last week, Shiva and we were in San Francisco, and self-driving cars are already there in the roads. Like, you can hire a robo-taxi. Like, there's no drivers. The car just comes and picks you up. I didn't get an opportunity to ride it. Shiva did. I did get an opportunity to interact with that car. I was standing on the sidewalk waiting for my turn to cross, but I was kind of close to the road. The car did stop for me despite the car having the right of way, so I felt like real safe. I wish drivers drove that way. So car ownership as we know it is changing. In another 5 years, half of the cars might be robo-taxis and self-driving cars on autopilot. So we should think about the future when it comes to plans like these. Think about 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead. So now is the time to get rid of parking minimums, and it's a very reasonable demand. It's a very fair demand. So you don't have to go until San Francisco to experience self-driving vehicles. Just go to Ring Road at the University of Waterloo. They have an autonomous bus, and that pretty much does the same thing. So it's about time we got rid of parking minimums. So that being said, now I'd like to speak more about affordable housing. We spend a lot of time discussing on what would happen if we got rid of parking, but we are currently experiencing a housing crisis right now in this moment, and we need to do a lot to solve it. It's not like the city doesn't have a plan or a blueprint to solve it. I usually complain a lot about things, but the city's affordable housing strategy is phenomenal. But the irony is that in the official plan, there was not much overlap between the two. Even the city's affordable housing strategy calls for getting rid of parking requirements. I could not find the word fourplex in the city's official plan. Fourplexes were supposed to happen in early 2024. Staff were supposed to come back to council. I was just reading the CBC article. I don't know if September counts as early 2024, but we have not heard anything concrete back yet. So I was disappointed to see that. So the original plan can be more ambitious. The official plan can be more ambitious. It has a lot of good things like moving away from surface parking lots, and it speaks about getting into multi-story parking. But instead of going into the nitty-gritty, if we got rid of minimum parking requirements, it would just be amazing. Thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you, Ashwin. Does anyone have any questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thanks very much. Phil, can't tell with the mask on? Okay. Welcome, Phil. Just state your name and your municipality.
Yeah, sorry.
Please. And you have 5 minutes.
Oh, I was at max. Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Marfisi. I'm a resident of Waterloo. 2 things I wanted to briefly cover. I'm going completely off the cuff, so forgive me if I go on little digressions. The first is parking minimums. I do really want to echo support for what Ashwin said and for the very thorough presentation from the University of Waterloo students. It is extremely encouraging to see the next generation coming out and advocating for improvements to our city. So congrats to you guys on doing that, and please keep coming because the city always needs to hear more from its young adults. I want to echo the support for things that they said when things like the sky will not fall if we get rid of parking minimums. There has been a lot of cities, as you saw on the map, that the students showed from that parking reform network. And I do think that there's some cities that we can look to in North America that are much larger than Waterloo region, but the implications for getting rid of parking minimums would be much more to consider, I think, there, but just because of their size. Edmonton has gotten rid of parking minimums, I think, completely, mostly across the city. They have been doing well, but I think another example that might be worth looking at for council and their own research and for city staff is Buffalo. 2017, Buffalo got rid of parking minimums citywide, and one thing that they noted in particular was that it was very good for helping with the development of small mixed-use buildings. Developers who have much larger projects, typically have the financial capacity to play around a little bit more with parking minimums. But I think in general, if you ask most people, what a lot of people want to see is smaller, low to mid-rise buildings is typically the thing that the public supports the most. When you get rid of stuff like these are the types of things that you can encourage more of, and these are the types of projects that typically have more public support than some of the larger ones that you see coming to the city. So I would very much encourage seeing that coming forward in any amendments to the plan. The second thing I wanted to talk about was in terms of seeing more commercial uses that Kay and Ashwin were speaking about. I'm a resident of the suburbs, and I think that there's sometimes this kind of maybe false idea that, the suburbs, more higher income people live in suburbs, and sometimes in your core areas, you maybe sometimes have to have more mixed income. I don't think that's not always true. If you do not currently rent in Uptown Waterloo, it is nearly impossible to afford an apartment in Uptown Waterloo. So if you wanted to move to a place where you could bike more, where you could walk more, it is extremely difficult to do that. So many people that might want to do that are going to be residing in some of like the outer neighborhoods. I would love to see more flexibility on commercial uses within the suburbs. Currently, I can walk to one cafe on an arterial road. It is really not pleasant walking to commercial spaces that are primarily at arterial road intersections for like doing that all the time. I would love to see the city consider even the possibility of accessory commercial units. I know that we permit ADUs. It would really be cool to see something like ACUs. I'm not talking about, you know, someone having a nightclub in their garage or, you know, something wild. Or, you know, or hosting, you know, raves in their backyard. What I mean more of is like, could someone have a small cafe in an accessory unit like next to their house? When you look at the types of things that fit within some of the properties that are in some of our suburbs, there's a lot of space.
You have 1 more minute, Phil.
Okay, sorry, I will wrap up. Sorry. So I would just love to see allowing more commercial use flexibility within suburbs. I know that the suburbs are not going to change overnight. I know the change is going to be very gradual. But I would love to be able to walk to places within the interior of suburban neighborhoods where there are lots of lovely trails. There's lots of lovely hydro corridor trails where I am, where I could walk to a place, grab a coffee with a friend. Because right now, if a friend were to come over and visit me, I'm not going to walk anywhere. I'm going to hop in a car, likely to drive to something, because the walking is often not safe and it's not super pleasant. But if we could walk to somewhere within the interior of neighborhoods, I think that would make experiences pleasant, increase walkability a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this delegate? Okay, seeing none, thanks very much for your impromptu delegations. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak and share their perspective? Okay. Going once? Okay, thanks very much. If there are no more delegations, this public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reports to council at a later date. And again, just a reminder, there's no decisions being made tonight. This is again another opportunity for to hear people's views and for staff to gather and council to gather more information. Just wanted to double check if council had any further questions for staff. Nope, seeing none. Okay, thank you very much. And I do want to thank this, you know, the people who've come in to listen tonight and to share their perspective. And just make a quick reminder that if you want to see some of the progress that has been made in Waterloo, Google like Waterloo from 1990s, and you'll see the difference from when I came to school. Like some of you are new to the community, but what the square looked like when I was a first-year student versus what it looks like now. I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but if you find an old photo or from what that looked like, you might be quite surprised with the progress that has been made over the last number of years. So not to say there's not more, as we've heard, there's certainly more work to do, absolutely. But this is why it's important to hear people's input. So thank you very much. Moving on, there's no notice of motions to consider. There's no correspondence or communications. There's no unfinished business. Are there any questions, council? Seeing none. New business. Any new business, council? Are you saying yes? Yeah. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that the Clare Hills Community Association hosted a fun fair yesterday at St. Moritz Park. It was great. There were staff there talking about the revitalization of St. Moritz Park that was really well received, and I think the community is really excited about. Perhaps most of the community who attended the fun fair were more excited about the video game truck that was rented by the neighborhood association, but I digress. It was the quote final event for this community association because many of the volunteers who are on the board have been on the board for a very long time, and we've struggled, as we heard earlier today, around volunteers volunteerism, they've struggled to replace members of the neighborhood association's board. And part of the intent of this last event was to hopefully recruit some new volunteers to take over the work of the community association. And I'm happy to say in the short time that I was there were a few folks who were interested. So fingers crossed. And just a reminder for all of us here, as we know how important the neighborhood associations are for our communities and how much vibrancy they bring to the communities, that really the people who run these neighborhood associations are volunteers, they're people who live in the community, and it's exceptionally important that we continue to support them as staff always have, but also to recognize that they do a lot of work. And when you're in that position for 10, 15 years, as some of these folks who have been on the Clare Hills board have been, sometimes it's time to move on. So hopefully we've got some fresh blood coming into the neighborhood association there, and I'm excited to see that go forward, but wanted to reflect on that here today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I'm going to riff on this whole volunteer theme here. So the weekend was full of activities, like super full of activities, and a couple things really stand out to me. Actually, leading into the weekend, I had a chance to connect with the Spinning Wheels team, which raises money for Parkinson's supports in the community. And I learned a lot about how addressing Parkinson's, especially among people who have early onset Parkinson's, can raise the boat for, or raise the tide for all people who are experiencing neurological impacts, whether it's from other diseases or just correlated with being an older adult. And that was completely volunteer, I would say driven, but they were riding bicycles all over the place. And it was really quite amazing to learn that Canada has the highest rate of Parkinson's. And so it's something that we need to be really mindful of. There were two other walks that were pretty important. So Shalom had their mental health walk. They fantastic volunteers. They had met their I sound like Donald Trump when I say that. Fantastic volunteers. They'd met their, I know, terrible, huh? The biggest, the best. They'd already surpassed their fundraising goal, and so that was really amazing, especially because they provide sliding care of rates for their counseling services at Shalom. And then also the Kidney Foundation's walk. And so again, they met their fundraising goal, and it was great to just honor Dr. Tom Liu, who had really been a pioneer for renal services through Grand River Hospital. So just an incredible showing of people in our community investing in our community through their time and through their connections with each other. So I was just really gratified to see that. And then just one last little plug for Emmanuel at Brighton's 60th anniversary. So this is one of those things where I feel very, very closely connected to this childcare facility. It is a Ward 7 treasure, started at Emmanuel United Church, and it does a fantastic job of providing childcare support for families, working families. And so I just wanted to shout out that 60 years strong and wishing them 60 more.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to mention that on Saturday, the Canadian Arab Women's Association held a Middle Eastern Festival at City of Kitchener. Sorry, Waterloo. I went to Kitchener. It was a really fantastic event with music, food, vendor market, and I just wanted to mention too, and I don't think I'm out of line because it was mentioned at the event, that the association is now being recognized by the United Nations. They do a lot of incredible work for empowering women and building community, and it was a great event, and I'm very proud of them and all the work that they do, that they're actually going to then be connected to the UN. And Lumen was on Saturday night, which I'm sure others will mention. It was incredible, and the crowds were huge. The installations were amazing. It really was like staff. I just can't even imagine the hours that they put into it, but it was it was incredible, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Agree, it was a phenomenal evening. Councillor Vassic.
It was such a full weekend, so I couldn't go to all of the things that I wanted to go to, but I wanted to highlight two that I couldn't go to. One was in my neighborhood. It was a street party, and again, thanks to the neighborhood team, as usual, for the continual funding, so the streets and neighborhoods are able to do the same events every year rather than having to come up with something new. Very good. The second thing I wanted to highlight was there's a counter protest at City of Kitchener as well, really just in support of to us LGBTQI folks and making sure that all children and youth have access to the resources, people, and education they need to feel like they can be their full selves. And so just an appreciation for that counter protest and everyone who's continuing to speak up for those communities' rights. And then I just wanted to tell everybody about KWAG's, Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery's new flagship fundraiser. So instead of a gala, they're doing a whodunit kind of event, and you have to catch the Paris prowler who's trying to get a masterpiece of art. So spread the word with people you think might want to participate in that. It's $125 a ticket, which is pricey, but there are people in the community who can certainly afford to raise that money, or a table of 8 for $800.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Council? All right. Sorry, I packed up my agenda. Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah, it was a very full weekend, and thanks to all the people in the community who, especially the volunteers and the staff who work really diligently on the weekend to put together these tremendous events. So, any new business? Seeing none. Enactment of bylaws, Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That is unanimous. Adjournment, moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Wright. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you to everyone who is in attendance tonight.